Hello and welcome back to Bookish. It's been about a week since I made a video. I've had some family stuff to take care of this past week, and so I've really kind of been gotten behind on both my reading and my booktubing. But about a week ago, Shawn the Book Maniac tagged me in to do the Finally Fall, Finally Autumn booktube tag, so I thought I'd do that today. And I appreciate Shawn tagging me to do this video. It looked really interesting, and like many readers, fall is my favorite season. Here in Texas, we get a really long fall and almost no winter. Today's a good day to do this tag because it's cool and it's rainy. You should know where I live in Texas, we probably won't get more than 10 days where the temperature is below about 35 degrees, and it will stay pretty mild most of the winter and the fall. Please excuse my dog. He's perfectly okay. He just makes a sound like he's leaking or he's a tea kettle all the time. Sorry about that. But anyway, it is finally fall here. It felt like fall today, so I thought today would be a great day to do this tag. And again, thanks to Shawn for tagging me. So I'm probably not going to do the tag justice. I'll leave links to Shawn's video down below and the original tag if I can finally find it, and I'll try to remember to copy the questions. I'm afraid I'm not going to do it justice because I didn't write down the full kind of creative tag intro, and I just went with the basics. So question number one was challenge number one was to pick a book with a vivid setting. So my book with a vivid setting is The Deerslayer by James Fenimore Cooper. Cooper is one of those writers who for most of my reading life I've avoided reading. And a few years ago I picked up a copy of The Deerslayer because as a history teacher, Cooper occupies kind of an important place in the history of American literature that is frequently forgotten. And I picked it up kind of out of an obligation. You know, I felt bad for avoiding Cooper without ever having read it and given him a chance. And as is frequently true, when I pick up a classic author who I avoided for reasons which don't have a lot of logic behind it, I found I really enjoyed this. And you know, Cooper's description of the beauty of this really particular lake around which the entire action of the story is set, his depiction of the natural area there is really amazing. And that is one thing I think Cooper is great at, is in creating a setting and describing it. And if he has a flaw, it may be in insisting on describing the backside of every leaf that any character encountered. But I really like The Deerslayer, and I plan to read more Cooper later. So challenge number two, or question number two, is to pick a beautifully written book about a heavy subject. The most beautiful writer that I think that I can think of that's written in the 20th and I guess a little bit in the 21st century is William Trevor. Mostly he's famous for short stories, and he is probably, in my opinion, one of the greatest short story writers to have ever lived. But he also wrote novels, and frequently his novels deal with heavy subjects. In this case, Felicia's Journey deals with a young woman's kidnapping by a serial killer, which is really dark and heavy subject matter, but Trevor is a beautiful writer. So this is my choice for a book that is about a heavy subject but is beautifully written. And if you've never read William Trevor, you really should. I would start with the short stories to get a feel for what Trevor's like before I moved on to the novels, but he is an amazing writer. So challenge number three, or question number three, was to pick a nonfiction book that taught me something new. I don't think I've learned more about from any nonfiction book than from The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene, in which he essentially explains string theory and a lot of things about physics that I never had really understood. I avoided physics and science classes when I was in high school and college, being kind of a liberal arts person, and a lot of my reading for a while was trying to make up for that. And Brian Greene is a great, accessible science writer. He may not be the foremost scientist and the foremost, thinker in terms of string theory, but he is one of the great explainers, I think, of complicated science. And so I learned a lot from Brian Greene's The Elegant Universe. So that's my choice for a nonfiction book that taught me something I didn't know. Challenge number four was kind of, challenging because it is to choose a fictional family or household or friend group that you'd like to be a part of. Well, I thought about this for a while, and I almost went with, the Aubrey Maturin novels by Patrick O'Brian, because that's my number one go-to friendship books and kind of my dude bro series of choice. But I decided instead to pick the Rabbit family from the Roddy Doyle trilogy about a working class family in Dublin, and Jimmy Rabbit Sr. and all his kids and all their problems. There are three of those books. There's The Van, which is the one I'm holding up here, which centers around Mr. Rabbit buying a fish and chips van, a Mr. Chippy van, and driving it around and selling fish and chips during the World Cup. And I believe it was a World Cup that Ireland actually made it to. And then there's also the Snapper, which is about an unintended pregnancy involving Jimmy Rabbit Sr.'s daughter, Siobhan, I believe. And then there's the most famous one of the books because it was made into a movie. It's called The Commitments, about Jimmy Rabbit Jr.'s attempt to create a soul band in Dublin, which I really love the movie and I love that book. But anyway, the Rabbit family is my family of choice, in part because they're just so comfortable. You know, they are without pretension. They are sarcastic and they pick on one another, but they are open and loving and accepting of one another in kind of ways that I found really comfortable. And by the way, I don't know if you've ever read Roddy Doyle before, but I think these books about the Rabbit family are pretty perfect. And I'd forgotten about them till I started doing this tag, and so I appreciate being reminded of those books. Challenge 5 was to create a pile of fall-colored book spines, and well, I'm not going to do that. Challenge number 6 was to choose a book where someone is telling a story. So I chose The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich, and in this book, a young boy of around the age of 11 or 12 tells the kind of horrifying story of his mother's rape and attack, and the impact that has on his mother and his family and his father, and their attempt to find the guilty party. And as a lot of Louise Erdrich books do, it deals with the relationship, or the borderland relationships between Native American society and Anglo-American society. Anything I can do to get you to read a Louise Erdrich book, I would do. So challenge 7 was to read a dark and creepy book, or to choose a dark and creepy read to talk about. And the darkest, creepiest person who writes I can think of is Stephen King. I'm just joking. I think Stephen King's actually a fairly wonderful person. But I've always avoided reading Stephen King, and horror is not my genre. It's just not something I enjoy. So, you know, when I read some positive reviews about King's detective books, which, you know, Mr. Mercedes is the first in a series of detective books involving retired policeman Bill Hodges, I thought this sounds like something for me, and I picked it up and I read it, and I think like most Stephen King books, it's eminently readable. It is written with a fairly distinctive style, which I think you either like or you don't, and it's creepy. And, you know, it's horrifying in places. And so that was my choice. Jeez. That was my choice for a creepy read to go with this Finally Fall challenge, Stephen King's Mr. Mercedes. Challenge 8 was to pick a short, heartwarming story, and for Victober, I've begun reading A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which has to be, I think, one of the shortest, most heartwarming stories there is. I'm a big fan of pretty much every film version of A Christmas Carol is something that I love, and as I said in the Victober TBR video, I've never actually read it, so I've started reading it, and I'm impressed with, in part, how close the movies are to the actual novel. But I'm hoping to make a video, a Victober wrap-up video, in which I talk about that more later. But my choice for a heartwarming short story, or short book, or short tale would be A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Then challenge number 9 was to talk about an old favorite you'd like to return to, and rather than talking about a specific book, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite authors, and that's Honoré de Balzac, who I plan to return to after too long of a time off from by reading Cousin Bet in December. This will definitely be on my December TBR, and I love Balzac, and I love his work so much, and so many of his novels have crept their way into my top 10 or top 20 list. And this is supposed to be one of his better novels, and that says a lot for me. So I'm definitely going to read Cousin Bet, and that is the old favorite I'd return to. And then challenge number 10, I think, because I didn't write it down. Oh, I did write it down. Was to talk about your cozy reading accessories. So my cozy reading accessories depend on, well, clothing-wise, it's a t-shirt, a pair of sweatpants, and a pair of socks. In the fall and the winter, that's what I wear. If it's the summertime, substitute the, or if it's warmer, substitute the sweatpants for, substitute shorts for the sweatpants. I don't really have cozy reading accessories. I don't have a blanket. I don't have a pillow. I don't even have a particular chair. I don't have a time of day. I don't have a beverage. I don't have a hat. I don't have any of those things. I just read. But if you were here at home and I was reading in the fall, I'd probably be wearing a t-shirt, a pair of probably gray sweatpants, and a pair of socks. Anyway, that's the Finally Fall BookTube tag. Again, thanks to Shawn, the Book Maniac, for tagging me in this. It was a fun tag to do. Let me know what you think of the books I chose, or let me know what you think of the video. Thank you for watching.